The case for vent art. If great art is a consequence of suffering, then I want less great art. If great art is a consequence of people dealing, processing and coping with trauma, then I want more great art, because I care about humans more than art. Part 1. It's a wonderful day in the realm of the gods, but you are mischievous, and woke up to seize the day, cause trouble where you go, sing of darkness. The goddess of darkness is your friend, and she lights a candle. Things burn, a stuffed animal is torn and then repaired. You hang out with her and watch children horror movies. The flames flicker. The blood from the war spells memento mori, and the darkness speaks to you. Do you ever feel bad, but in an artistic way? Sadness and anger are so bothersome. So don't they say, only the greatest suffering can lead to the greatest art or something? And maybe it will make me feel better. I really need to feel better. Let's make some vent art together.
I'm not a good actor. I don't know how to read my script to you other than just doing a voiceover, giving you some art as like backdrops. You're just getting voiceover Moon to like explain to you my points about vent art, why I kinda like it, why I kinda hate it, stuff that I'm concerned for about teenagers, and what I think is some really cool dark art, you know. I do struggle with depression. I'm not even sure if I'm like in frame because it's like very hard to see. I don't think that being an artist is shameful. I'm worried that all the support that people are giving me is like going to waste because I don't deserve it, and that's like, you know, I want to like reach out to people that also have this problem, to give this kind of motivational speech, you know, as an artist, to say, hey, please keep creating art, and also I hope you're getting better.
Part 2. Let's Wikipedia this. Vent art, what is it? Let's Wikipedia this, actually. Wikipedia is a bit lacking here, and we have to go ask Urban Dictionary. Such a disappointment. Someone should write Wikipedia a strong-worded letter about how lacking they are in artist internet culture. So here's Urban Dictionary's definition. Vent art, noun. Art that someone makes to let out a feeling, usually a negative feeling like anger or sadness, venting your feelings out on the canvas. That is way too vague. That would make all of art vent art, more or less. We're gonna define it slightly more. Common overlapping interests in vent art as I see it are crying character, self-harm, anger, self-inserts, and let me point out that the demographic that titles their art vent art is very young. It's a type of beginner artist, people that mostly are in the phase where they draw their favorite characters or their OCs. Teenage artists. Now I don't think some might be older, but if we trust Urban Dictionary with the definition here, a lot more art would be titled vent art than what you find when searching for these terms. So let me type out my own definition. Vent art, noun, depicting pain, abandonment, or sadness through a character's suffering, usually a replacement for self-harm. The artist might depict self-harm or the aftermath as a way to show their commitment to these big feelings. The focus character is usually a stand-in for the artist. A persona or self-insert OC are popular. Part 3. Romanticize the darkness.
So, you know how life is like kind of bad? Well, what are you going to do about that? I mean, there's a few things you can do. First, you could work to improve yourself and make the world a better place. That's probably the most effective approach eventually. But the problem is that it's hard. And I don't like things that are hard.
Sometimes I wonder if I should be medicated.
With all the self-harm and body horror going on, I think it's a safe assumption that vent art is a coping mechanism. Not as destructive as actual self-harm, but does romanticize the depression in a way. I think it's better to use a character in art as your punching bag than doing self-harm on your own body. But vent art is disturbing, not because the depictions are so realistic or so gruesome, hyper-realistic blood coming from the eyes or something. Most of the pictures that try for the most gory visuals kinda lack the skill. No, what I find so disturbing is how young the artists are. Edgy teenagers being edgy is one thing, But titling bloody gory art as vent art, it has different implications. That the person sharing might be living through traumatic events. That stuff is happening to them. Everybody goes through it, right?
That out there? That's my grave. Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV.
Life is suffering. Life is pain. But that doesn't make it less painful. There are some emotions that are pretty widespread, some nihilistic ideas we all kinda share. But just because you are not the first person to suffer, doesn't make your suffering any less real. Vent art, when you criticize it, it often looks uninspired, even though it's very inspired. The people posting it are really going through it. My heart goes out to them. But the art itself is, to me, very non-appealing, and it doesn't have to. Vent art is like having a personal punching bag. It's yourself, twisted in an artistic way. I just hate how hopeless it feels and how far from any action. In some ways, it's very removed from what actually happened. Now, very harsh, not empathy-driven, but artistic-driven critique I holler at you here. Let me know what happened. If you want your art to be meaningful, just depicting some disembodied character not making me feel much. Just because there are tears doesn't make it a sad scene. In fact, the over-the-top goriness, the lack of fighting, the lack of direction and specificness of a lot of vent art would make me roll my eyes, if I didn't know better. But I do remember being a beginner. I remember drawing very unspecific suffering. I remember being hurt but not knowing what my problem was. I lacked the language. I also lacked a lot of skill. Vent art is not trying to communicate the emotions really. It's a momentary solution. It's working through it. It's not the big art aesthetic. Vent art is personal, unspecific. It's the first step that can lead you down to more art. If you want, you can go very dark. There's a problem with depicting suffering so much and romanticizing it and making it like an artistic goal so much that you forget the realness, and that your goal with vent art is not to increase your suffering, but to decrease it. The goal of making vent art should be to feel better after it. If drawing something disturbing and then destroying it, or like laughing at it or something, or whatever it is, makes you feel better, go do that. But don't fall into the trap of saying, I'm only a great artist if I create these hurtful, meaningful images, because that's not true. True meaning can be found in anything. You don't need to feel that. Like in the beginning, I had this clip where the darkness says, I need to feel artistic pain to show the world, you know. We have this stereotype of Vincent van Gogh being a great artist because he suffered so much, because he had this mental illness.
The myth of the tortured artist is strong. The depressive poet, the irascible painter, the manic, substance-abusing writer. Romanticizing mental illness in the lives of artists is an absurdly popular trope in movies, books, social media, and in art itself.
But that's not true. Suffering doesn't make great art. Suffering is just suffering. And you want to get better. And if art makes you better, then that's great. And that's great art. And it's honest because it comes from your emotions, because you're not trying to sugarcoat it. You're not trying to sell people something. But there can be the sense of selling something, selling yourself, selling your image, trying to like chase the cloud of people, trying to get sympathy or pity. It is a cry for help sometimes. This is why most vent art is not really posted if it's true vent art, or if it's posted in like very dedicated subreddits, right? When the first heartbreak comes, when you are going through the first things in your life, when you are a young person, when you become the first time depressed, it will feel so much darker than anything later on, because it's the first time that you're experiencing it. The later you go through something like this, the more you already know how many people have suffered before you, the more empathy you have for those people, the more people have told you their suffering, and it's easier to see this in context. But when you're first going through it, it's like the big thing. No one has felt this dark, no one has felt this unloved, this unlovable than you have. And that is why I think we need to take this serious. We need to like let these people know yes, your suffering is valid, your emotions are valid, and we can work through it, you know. You don't have to paint everything dark. We don't have to, you know, be the stereotype of a goth or something. You can be a goth and you can be the stereotype of it, but we don't want you to fall into the trap of saying, this is me and this is what I will always feel, because there will be good days, there will be bad days, and life will change. You can change it for the better, right? And we don't want you to change it for the worse just because it fits in your own narrative of I've always suffered and from now on it's downhill. Don't fall into that trap. Part 4, dark art. There's this German artist, Käthe Kollwitz, who died in World War II, but his son died in the First World War. She depicted her suffering and the suffering of other grieving mothers very often. Her art is so interesting. I got to see it in person. She depicted a mother cradling her dead adult son. She showed not just herself, but other mothers as well, huddling together, searching for comfort, but not finding it in each other. These things are meaningful, but they need context. The originals hang close together in a series that makes it clear that they are meant to be read, like a dark storybook. They feed each other context. It also helps that museums have plaques, giving you the context. Depicting tragedy can be so difficult. It can look stiff and over-dramatized. Kollwitz never went outside of realistic depictions. There is no fantastical elements to the suffering. She often depicted motherhood. That was her specialty. Mothers and their kids. There's something so human about her art. It makes me cry. The soft girl tended to by adults who are in worry and pain. This is really touching. Blood and gore can be nice symbolism, and of course also pretty realistic depictions of real tragedy, but it also looks very cheap very fast, like a low-budget horror movie by some film students. I included some blood in my painting, but I think it cheapens what I really wanted to depict. There are so many dark artists, and you probably know some, and you can search for others. I just wanted to bring this one up because I think there's value in going outside, going to a museum, and looking at some real historical art, learning something from other people. The more unique your life is, the more unique your art can usually be, because you're pulling from experiences that other people don't have. But there's still nothing bad or wrong with pulling from experiences that most people have. Then it will just be for a wider audience, you know. Some people even find humor in darkness. Some people are very vocal about what happened to them and push their experiences in artistic vision in ways that can be sinister. It can also be just very liberating, showing what happened to you and taking back the agency of the story that happened to you. For example, Jeanette McCurdy, she is being very vocal about how she feels about her mom, and that is very important. She wrote this autobiography called I'm Glad My Mom Died, and in it she depicts or she writes about how her mom abused her mentally, and yeah. And it's really important to show how she survived and how she's not guilty about how it turned out, because the lost ties to her old family are good for her and are part of the healing process. The non-forgiveness is part of the healing process for her. Outsiders cannot really judge this. The general forgive to move on bullshit is something that victims are still encouraged to do, as if forgiving suddenly makes things better, not to mention that people forgiving their tormentors can regret it after, and society has decided you're not allowed to take it back. And that's very disturbing to me. I think the victims are the ones that get to decide what their emotions are and how they get to handle on these things, right? And having more stories, more people coming forth about how they dealt with it can also help other people with coping. Knowing that someone else is going through the same or similar experiences as you are going through can really help with not feeling that alone, not feeling like you have gone through something that's so horrible that no one else can ever understand you. There are people out there who can understand you. And there are people out there who will not understand you, and that's also fine. And you're lovable. You can get through this, and sharing these dark things is not always a glorification of the dark things. There is so much darkness. You just don't want to. You don't want to spiral into it. You want to spiral out of it. Like when someone says he wants to watch the world burn, right? You only get to watch when you have the privilege of not being on fire. Writing dark jokes, writing the darkness, or doing dark art is when you are on fire. It's trying to get out of it, trying to like get people to help you, or making fun of it, whatever. There's this one saying attributed to St. Lawrence, a Christian martyr, who was cooked to death under the Roman Empire. And he said, "I'm well done on this side, turn me over." I think there is something to it that you're allowed to make dark art, you're allowed to make dark jokes, you're allowed to make jokes about your misery. But you want to be goal-oriented in the back of the mind some days, you know. Don't spiral downwards. And be encouraging and forgiving to yourself. Don't feel guilty about how you deal with something, how you cope, but also don't try to push others in a very distinct direction. Part 5, my symbolism.
An inspiration for how Fish is made, as funny and strange as the game itself, is David Lynch's Children's Fish Kit, a mostly conceptual idea that Lynch described as like a model airplane kit, you know, where you get the pieces and assemble them, but with a fish. Can you swim like a fish? Can you smell like a fish? The joke, of course, being that a fish is not like an airplane, and you cannot put one back together once it's taken apart.
Okay, I've talked like a bit about other people. I want to like talk a bit about my art and my stuff, what I draw and why I draw it. So I have a thing for ballet. It's interesting to me because it is a very challenging sport. The dancers are supposed to have perfect control over their faces and perform as if the movement was effortless. They're actors. I always found the dilemma of showing everything is fine and how hard it is actually on the human body to be a good analogy for most struggles. Ballet is one of the hardest sports that humanity has invented. I don't want to show my feelings, and performing, working, being collected always felt so uneasy. So ballet is this wonderful symbolism of acting as if everything is fine and cool, you know, and easy and elegant. But in reality, it's a hard struggle. It requires so much effort. You just don't want to show it. I really dislike showing big emotions, big tears and cries, because for one, it's hard to draw authentically, and because who wants to show their emotions? Hiding yourself, closing in on yourself from other people is just a big part of Vent art for me. I do a lot of twists, and those are for me body dysmorphia, related to weight and health struggles. Do you get it? I don't need to like tell you what those struggles are. I added blood and flowers here to have a deeper connection to the Vent art genre, to the aesthetic, but you know, I'm not a fan. I think I did like a bit too much. Like, I want to look authentic to the genre trappings of Vent art. Even though to me blood is really uncomfortable to paint, I hate it. I think it cheapens this painting, but not everything can be perfect. I'm not trying to be perfect, I'm just trying to like make some Vent art examples. A happy coincidence is how the organic shaped gold background reminds me of sci-fi spaceship and parasites. Don't know what is up with that, but it's great. And also very gross. Like way more gross than the blood. Is it water or clouds? Or the abstract shapes? I couldn't decide if I wanted to paint clouds or the ocean, and obviously the anatomy of the big pretty figure is very funky, but that's kind of the point of it all. I want my symbolism to be all over the place. I want it to be a bit disconnected, to feel like struggling in and of itself, to feel like a mind map, you know. I think the more realistic your your drawing is, the easier it is to decipher from the viewer standpoint. And that is not something that I want for vent art. For vent art, I want it to look like it's hard to figure out what exactly is happening, because whatever I'm going through, whatever I'm figuring out for myself is twisted, and to be authentic, I want to recreate that feeling of confusion in the viewer as well. I challenged myself to not look at any reference pictures and just do my own thing in these pieces, something that I don't do because these days I rely on references a lot. It's because I want everything to be the best quality, but for vent art, that is not the point. The point is not whether or not the dress looks believable or the hand is an unfinished mush. For me, it's in my body and my mind have a strong disconnection, and that's all that I wanted to paint. So I did like a few pieces. I wanted them to inspire each other, but also to look stylistically different from each other. And I hope you you understand what I'm trying to say here. I'm trying not to like spoil what my actual emotions are, but to root it into my own symbolism. And I used to actually draw like a lot of ballet girls. I even have some here still on this channel, on this YouTube channel. But yes, I always thought that ballet girls were a wonderful symbolism. And trying to like revisit my own old symbolism from my own old art from my late teenage years, it's kind of nostalgic, you know? Part 6. It's about love, it's about life.
The strength of art is in its ability to communicate powerful emotions more intensely than words are capable of. Because painful emotions are harder to understand and talk about, I think the expressions of these emotions are more often celebrated. A film that can connect you to something you might be incapable or embarrassed to talk about is often a great comfort in a world that doesn't completely accept you. But I often worry about the way that films featuring more simplistic emotions are overlooked as fluffy or lacking in meaning. Are negative or complex emotions more worthy of celebration just because they are more difficult to describe?
Love is not a new thing. People have fallen in love every day since the beginning. But that doesn't mean it's not good to fall in love, to live your own story. It's still meaningful. Even the most basic love story needs to be told. I get so irritated when people say this is uninspired, this storyline has been done before, oh, we all know the classic fairy tale. Listen, there are still new people that are being born that still need to be told the very basic storytelling. Like telling a story for a kid doesn't mean it has to be bad. It just means that we're taking this child, that we're taking this new person, and they get to experience every single story that we already have in the world that is still recorded, right? And they get to experience life. They have all the emotions still in front of them. They need some basic ass love stories. They need some basic ass happy stories, some stories about friendships, about the first time that they and their first friend are falling out with each other. It's all still meaningful, and just because something has been done before doesn't mean it's not meaningful to create it again for a new person, right? Life shouldn't be shit in general. And if you're able to make a living doing something you find creatively fulfilling, well, then you've hit the jackpot. Even the things that are knowable and repetitive and oh so normal, they happen to you. You fall in love, you are hit with loneliness. That's not boring or uncreative. It's meaningful, important work. It's so basic. Saying the opposite is not only cruel but dumb. Oh, love is old and everything has happened before, so this is meaningless. New people are still born and they deserve the fullness of life and the full spectrum of human emotions. There will be thousands of years from now, when all our education is the ninja influencer Twitch streaming class, still people who will fall in love the first time.
This is something that's going to be online forever and hopefully teaching people how to become amazing professional streamers for decades, for a millennia to come.
And that is life. That is meaning right there. You techno future babies living in the Matrix. If you want originality, go watch Jacob Jeller's rundown of indie games here on YouTube and observe how bizarre and time-specific stories can be.
I don't think how fish is made is actually that nihilistic, though. No matter which way you go, up or down, The curtain drops for a moment, and you get what feels like a direct address. It tells you, in one way or another, that everyone is going through it. And it absolutely sucks to hear that everyone is going through it, because other people going through it doesn't make it any easier or more clear for you to go through. But they are going through it, and so have you. After that, you either end up as part of an eldritch mass in which all thoughts wail simultaneously, in which you are a swelling god of no purpose, or you end up as part of a fish sandwich.
There is stuff on Earth worth living for. I create cheesy, kitschy art because it brings me happiness, and I hope it does for others as well. Yes, sadness is a big part of life. It's so hard to capture, and we need art when it hits us. Sad songs are incredibly powerful, but so is the warm pastel landscape with characters having a picnic or enjoying the water. Let me read you from a graffiti sprawled on a bus station. If you promise to stay alive just a little bit longer, I promise that we are going to make this world a place worth living in, by any means necessary. I ain't giving up, I swear. Spotted in Clackamas, Oregon. So, vent art. It's good. It helps in the moment. But it's not all. We need to keep fighting and living and making this a better life for each other. I will see you tomorrow.
You know what makes me really happy? Not much, but this setup here, this decorative stand here, makes me really happy. Do you see this? My magnolia is starting to bloom. It's December. This is insane. Also, this tiny little snoot ball here.